welcome. Another Sunday evening, full house. Tonight, I would like to talk about doubt, inspired by a couple conversations that I had with friends earlier this week. In Buddhism, we have teachings on what's called skeptical doubt, and we have teachings on what's called great doubt. And superficially, one of them is considered good and the other one's considered bad. The 5 hindrances in Buddhism includes what's called skeptical doubt, and the 3 by Tori Zenji include great faith, great doubt, and great determination. The 3, I don't know what they're called, the 3 somethings.
The 3 greats.
The 3 greats, yes. 3 requisites are great faith, great doubt, and great determination. So what's the difference between great faith, what's the difference between great doubt and skeptical doubt? And when is doubting helpful and when is doubting harmful? I want to look at this nuance a little bit. Specifically pertinent to the conversations that I had this week, they were all around decisions that people were making in their lives. Now, I don't think many of us encounter a really big decision, down payment on a house, divorce, marriage, raising a child or not, without encountering some component of doubt. So this is a very real thing worth looking at in detail. So first, are these really different things? Or is this a different way of looking at the same thing? Maybe in the present moment, I believe that I am being very skillful in how I'm going about a decision, and next year I look back upon myself as having been a fool. And maybe this is a good sign. Maybe this is a sign of growth, of development, of maturation. So maybe we should all have the aspiration to look back upon ourselves as foolish, because it means that we got wiser. Therefore, anytime you look back upon yourself as foolish, maybe you can give yourself a pat on the back. Skeptical doubt versus great doubt. So I will start off with a little definition of each. Skeptical doubt, let's define as doubting what is true or what you know to be true. That's skeptical doubt. There is something that is true, something that you know to be true, and still you find yourself unconfident about that. This, of course, brings up the question, well then, how do I know what's true? And there's 2 different inflections that I can give that question, which sit in the body different ways. One of them is, how do I know what's true? Kind of aloof, a little disempowered. How do I know what's true? Who's going to tell me? What's going to tell me? And another way we can ask the same question is, how do I know what's true. Recognize, affirm that we have the experience of confidence, of clarity, and honor that. Now let's define great doubt. So great doubt, let's define as doubting what you think is true. Maybe doubting what you have been told is true. Maybe doubting what you have always believed has been true, acted as if it were true, but all of a sudden, now there's a fracture in that. One of my teachers once had me read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which some of you are likely familiar with, a history of the United States written from a Native American perspective. And as you will assume, it's filled with lots of just gut-wrenching stories. And he suggested that as I read this story, that I read it with the question, or koan, as we say in Zen, is this wrong? Is it true that this shouldn't have happened? Looking at a detailed description of real life atrocities that make up the soil of our culture and our very being here today, reacting with a human heart, recognizing that the reaction of the human heart is sourced in, this shouldn't have happened, this was wrong, people shouldn't do this with each other, people shouldn't do this to each other, and really scrutinizing that. Obviously, we are a violent species. It may be that we're capable of working with these roots of violence within us, both on a personal and a cultural level, but war is very real, and it always has been. So if we think in response to violence, this shouldn't be, as I believe this Zen teacher said that I'll be speaking from a little later, if it shouldn't be, it wouldn't be. So great doubt is doubting what we think is true, that we may come upon a deeper reality. Skeptical doubt and great doubt. It's common, I think, to assume that quote unquote really great people were not inhibited by this phenomenon of skeptical doubt. They lived with a passion and a faith and just bulldozed through obstacles one after another as they accomplished their goals. And one inspiring story in our lineage, in the Korean Zen lineage, is that of Songsan Sunim, who brought a very large tradition of Korean Zen Buddhism to this country and around the world. In his 20s, there's a story of a retreat that he did as a solo practitioner in the mountains that involved standing under a waterfall and sleeping very little and lots of very intense chanting. There was a vow he had made, and he had to accomplish a very strenuous retreat with parameters that I don't know how long it lasted, but part of the story is during this retreat, he packed up his bags and started heading down the mountain 11 times. And all 10 of those 11 times, he returned back to his retreat and continued the ritual until he was done. And the 11th time, he packed up for good. So doubt is a very real obstacle that we deal with. And if we think that we shouldn't experience it, well, that's worth looking at. Great doubt and skeptical doubt. To be a good student is to be able to discern what's most important in a teaching. And this is to use doubt in an effective way. A friend of mine was practicing with Maizumi Roshi in Los Angeles and was very distraught about the alcohol abuse and sexual impropriety that was going on in his teacher's relationships with some of his students. And he took this question to a Tibetan teacher and said, I've got a lot of respect for my teacher, but a lot of his behavior is completely unethical. What do I do with this? And he said the Tibetan teacher drew a big circle and then a little circle inside the big circle. And he said the big circle represents your teacher's karma. The little circle represents your teacher's dharma. That's what you want. So we all, as students, have a responsibility to listen with intelligent ears and to be able to discern the Dharma as a world of teachings comes towards us from official teachers and from unofficial teachers, from our neighbors, from our family and friends. Within a tradition, we have to be able to discern dharma from dogma. And this is why all traditions evolve over time, teasing out what's really helpful in leading towards truth and what's cultural, skillful at a place and time, but changing. I'm going to read a talk from Tongen Harada Roshi, whom I've been referencing over the last couple weeks just because a book came out compiling his talks recently. And this book has his biography and also a number of talks. He died 5 years ago or so, entered Zen Buddhism just as World War II had ended in a culture that was very uprooted by 180-degree shift in views and economic disasters that was happening in 1940s Japan at the time. And he's someone whose story we might read and see as a person who really practiced with great faith and great doubt. Maybe that was more possible because the way this person saw the world as an 18-year-old, all of a sudden, overnight, just got shattered. he says, one wholehearted breath is a step taken. One wholehearted breath is a step taken. So if we wholeheartedly breathe, if we wholeheartedly exhale, we are taking a step forward. This is the law of karmic inevitability. The step that you take is never lost. Just carry on. Meaning every step forward that we take, in a way, is absolute. It's not something that can be undone. Give it your all, and then give it some more, clearly and decisively. Give it your all is a very interesting expression, because what we find when we give something our all is that we have more to give. Giving something our all is a practice. Settled in this one breath, nothing agitates you. Counting the breath is the perfect practice of truth. You need not entertain any ideas of gain, of getting something. Everything that you need is right here. Everything you need to know, you know already. In your life, in this moment, there is no more information that you need. And in really digesting this, the mind can really rest for a time, because it needn't create more material. If you practice counting the breath, you will become very calm in this practice, unflustered by anything that arises. You are giving your life over to this, practicing in such a way that there is no tomorrow. Practicing in such a way that there is no tomorrow. So if we really enter this, anxiety becomes unplugged, because it's the power source of anxiety is tomorrow. And when we really enter this experience right here, tomorrow is not to be found, and anxiety has no food. Thinking that you still have time is a loss of valuable time. Thinking that you still have time is a loss of valuable time. So the other thing that happens when we really enter this experience right here, via a meditation object or just direct present experience, is our most essential values self-obviate. Because we know there's nothing else, there's no other time to manifest what's most important to us, so it shows itself. When we're in the presence of when we're in the presence of people, we know that this is our last opportunity to speak with them. So we keep our relationships clean. Depending on having tomorrow to deepen your practice is not giving over your life to practice. So this is about Zazen. This is about everything. This is about living. depending on having tomorrow to get your life right is not living. There is only today, only this one period of meditation, this one breath. There is only this one doing, this one single point. This is all there is. Whether it is counting the breath, following the breath, working with the koan mu, shikantaza. This is describing different meditation practices. Burn within that practice, and that practice will take care of itself. And the fire metaphor is about letting the practice combust everything but itself, really throwing everything into it. This gets back to our very first question about how do I know what is true? When I throw everything into my practice, into this doing, this living, this activity, the only thing that remains is what is true. Everything else burns up in the fire of practice. Practice nurtures practice. One thing that he could mean by this is by practicing this continual wholeheartedness, this continual letting go, this continual engagement, our faith in our ability to do that, it improves. We're more and more able to realize that this is our last opportunity to express ourselves honestly, to say goodbye. Practice nurtures practice, as opposed to when practice gets us what we want tomorrow. When we wholeheartedly practice today, right now, tomorrow we're all the more prepared to continue practicing. First and foremost, believe with all your life that you are immersed in the Buddha way here and now. What that might have meant to listeners, I don't know. That you are immersed in the Buddha way here and now. Perhaps another way of translating that is with all your life, believe first and foremost, believe that nothing is amiss, that nothing is mistaken, that you are okay. We walk this one path. And backing up a little bit, when you hear this, believe with all your life that you are immersed in the Buddha way, here and now, that nothing is amiss, that everything is okay. The part of you that reacts and says things are not okay, there are big problems, remember that the person speaking these lines had 2 atomic bombs dropped upon his country, and has a sense of that also. Purely throwing all of your might into it, maintain this one straight path, this one practice you have been given to do. If you practice in this way, if you live in this way, you won't have the possibility of regret later. Regret is founded upon our subtle belief that we'll have another opportunity later, therefore we don't really have to do it right now. So this is being spoken from the context of a early 20th century Japanese monastery, culturally very, very different. We might think that our lives are complicated, and as such, we cannot throw ourselves into this one doing in the same way that other people could who had more rarefied circumstances. But this is not so. Our lives are not complicated. It is simply that we make them so with our view. We only ever do one thing at a time, think one thing at a time, decide one thing at a time. Sometimes things happen very quickly, but even a piano player using 10 fingers at once graces across one chord per moment. And in the practice of shikantaza, we learn to listen to what the chord of the moment is, taking in everything that is here right now and receiving it as one. And just like in music, that has a response. The response might be an action, it might not be. Byron Katie, who's a modern teacher, says whenever someone asks her something, it's very clear to her if the response is yes or if the response is no. And this is the experience of a very clear mind. The response that's there is apparent. Dan Brown, a Tibetan teacher that died less than 10 years ago, said one of the qualities of the awakened mind, my hand went down there and gesturing towards refinement. One of the qualities of an awakened mind is it's organized. And the more organized we become and actually see the thoughts, the feelings, the images as they arise and pass, the more the mind becomes a helper in this living game. The more an idea is needed and an idea arises and we can roll with it. The more someone asks a question and there's a response and we can share the response. Who knows where these things come from, but they're there. To close, Zen comes from the Chinese word Chan, comes from the Sanskrit Jan. Sanskrit Jhana from jhana, or concentration, meditation. That's why sometimes it's called the meditation school. And what we're doing is refining our quality of attention. Because ultimately, with anything that we do in our living, our experience of that doing is our quality of attention. So in Zazen, or in any practice we take on, we work with the quality of our attention. And we cultivate great faith and great doubt. Sometimes it sounds mechanical when we give meditation instructions, let go of thoughts, return to present moment experience. But really what we're doing is we're unplugging our habits of anxiety, depression, control, and returning to what's really happening before we attempted to manipulate it. And this is great doubt from the perspective of doubting our egoic habitual MO, and it's great faith in coming into what's really alive and trusting that we don't need to give rise to that habit energy. Life is a process of filtering out bad advice, much of which is our own self-derived and self-given bad advice. Concentration takes us to our clear mind. And concentration can be cultivated in many ways. If you feel like your meditation practice helps you cultivate concentration or clear seeing, that's great. And if you don't, please ask for help. Ask a teacher for help, ask an elder for help, ask a Sangha member for help. There are lots of avenues to cultivate clarity, and meditation is a really, really age-old one. But for all of us, at best, that tool works 99% of the time. We all need other tools in the tool belt. We cultivate great faith by exposing our incessant considerations to great doubt. These considerations are largely skeptical doubt. They're largely a means to avoid meeting life head on. To meet life head on is to live in great faith. To not brace ourselves before reality, but to be intimate with it. Great faith is seeing the futility of our own anxiety and worry. Seeing the futility in thinking about problems in a way that doesn't really deal with them head on. And living in great faith is setting aside the egoic struggle. And that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you.